Hello, everyone. I'm Carla Kopp. I am a board game designer, developer, and publisher, and I am here today with the amazing Shannon McDowell, who is a Canadian board game inventor and puzzle designer. She currently researches escape rooms at Wilfrid Laurier University, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong because it's
Laurier.
Canada and French. But Shannon, she designs hobby board games, puzzle hunt challenges, and she was a member of the design team for the 2019 Red Bull Escape Room World Championship, which sounds super impressive. But Shannon can tell you more about herself because I don't like stalk her or something. So
Are you sure though? Are you sure you don't?
I did for a weekend, but then I had to leave Canada.
Okay, well, that's fair. Yeah, so hi, I'm Shannon. I design board games, usually family style, like light strategy hobby games. That seems to be where I like to design best. And I also design puzzle games. I've designed some escape room board games, and I've also designed puzzles for puzzle hunts and for live action escape rooms, like the Red Bull Escape Room World Championship. I work at Wilfrid Laurier University in Brantford, Ontario, Canada, where for the last few years I've been researching cultural bias in escape rooms.
Oh, that sounds really fascinating.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's like taking all my background in like travel and education and intercultural communication and then putting it towards escape rooms, which I also love.
So, what is something with like cultural bias in escape room games? Like, what is something that was really surprising?
Really surprising. I guess it's just the number of things that you don't think of as cultural bias. So, for example, I've played a few escape games with Scott Nicholson, who I work with, who's a professor at Wilfrid Laurier in the game design program, and he's American and I'm Canadian with a very British background. My family is British, and just a lot of times, especially when we were in London, England, playing games, there would be British phrasing, and I'd be like, "We need to find this. We need to find this." And he's like, "I don't know what that means." And then I'd be like, "American, it's this." And he's like, "Oh, okay." And just that translation, I'm going, "Oh yeah, I guess that's not how like most North Americans say it, but it's something I grew up saying, coming from like British phrasing in our family." And then I was like, "Oh wait, no, this is how most people say it." So yeah, it's just funny that you don't even realize sometimes uh, what it is. Like even simple things like date format. If the answer to a puzzle is a date, well, in Europe and Canada, we go day, month, year. Americans do month, day, year. Some other countries may do the year first. So it's, you go, "Oh, I have a date. How do I format that in numbers to enter it into a lock?" So just little things like that you don't even realize until you come across them in a puzzle that, oh, not everyone thinks this way.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Like, I didn't know like there was people that did the year first, but I mean, people could do whatever they want. So,
Yep.
like, countries
Yeah.
make decisions. If we were all just on metric, life would be so much easier.
Right.
But yeah, there's probably like tons of things. Well, especially like you mentioned English, and it's like even like if you're in the US, like there's probably lots of differences between like East Coast and West Coast. Like you could
Yep.
say a word and you're in the same country and people don't know what you're saying.
Exactly. Like when I lived in Australia, my flatmate was Australian, and her and like I was the first Canadian that she'd met, and we had so many just funny miscommunications because the words we would say meant completely different things. And I had so many, like, I ordered so yeah, I was ordering a sub from Subway in Australia, and I asked for tomato sauce on it, which like marinara. And nope, tomato sauce in Australia is ketchup. So I ended up with all this ketchup all over my meatball sub, and that was unpleasant. But I never forgot that.
Well, I mean, yeah, you learn once and then you know forever, because like that was probably not the best meatball sub you've ever had.
Exactly. Yep, I was too hungry to throw it away. So
I mean, yeah, food is food.
yeah.
Is there anything that you like when you were researching that like what was like some of the obvious things that you like that just learned that maybe other people don't know about?
Trivia in puzzles is bad if it's for an escape room. I thought that was pretty obvious. It's in the escape room community. A lot of times people call it outside knowledge. So, knowledge that you would think that someone would know because this is common knowledge, right? But it's really not. So, trivia like, what country is Lisbon located in? Well, someone in Europe might be, well, that's perfectly obvious that that's clearly the capital of Portugal. But other people who didn't study European geography or from other parts of the world are going to be like, no, that's not actually obvious. I have no clue what the capital of Portugal is. So that kind of thing. It's just trivia, like celebrities, being in an escape room where they expect you to be able to recognize Brad Pitt. And like, okay, probably that seems like it should be obvious, but what if you get someone who just doesn't watch movies? It's not obvious. And it's different if you're talking a puzzle hunt. Like escape rooms, everything you need to solve an escape room should be within the game itself. Someone shouldn't necessarily need to go outside. But if you get to the more advanced puzzle games, like even tabletop puzzle games like the Emerald Flame that was just on Kickstarter recently, and puzzle hunt style games, those ones, a lot of times they do expect you to go to the internet, and that is a key component of those games, is that they want you to do more research and find the answer for yourself. So in that case, you may be expected to research the top 10 hits of 1967, or like music hits, or the top whatever most populous countries, random trivia that you wouldn't normally expect someone to know right off the bat.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a really good point. Like I know like a lot of game design has taught me like that what I think is common knowledge is not actually common knowledge, but that's especially important in escape room games. I think the common knowledge that like has been the most surprising for me has been that not everyone knows what the rainbow is. Like
Yes.
Is there anything like that where you were just like, this is common knowledge, like obviously, but it wasn't?
How to read cursive.
Oh.
If you're doing a historical game, a lot of game designers include like written cursive letters and things in the game where maybe there's a puzzle in there or you learn more about a character. But a lot of regions don't teach cursive in their elementary schools anymore. So you've got teenagers and kids, around that age, Gen Z, I guess you'd say, who don't read cursive. And so that is not common knowledge anymore.
I mean, from like my heart, that makes me happy because I remember like learning cursive and then it being like, oh, okay, this is not important anymore.
Yeah, you know enough to write your signature and that's it.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I can't even write things anymore. Like if I try to like write notes and stuff, like even I can't always read my own notes. So hopefully that's going the way of the past.
Yeah.
Was there anything else in your research that you'd want to mention or talk about?
Well, so I've done 2 papers. One on, because I did a full survey of escape room enthusiasts around the world. So I did a paper on the results of that survey that was players' accounts of cultural bias and how that all divided up and how we categorize the different types of cultural bias. So was really neat, categorizing puzzles by like language, or are they symbol based? Are they based on norms, cultural norms? Are they based on artifacts or knowledge, like trivia, riddles? And then there was a follow-up paper on that I did. And hopefully both of those will be published at some point so I can direct people to them. And I should have a video coming out soon that is kind of on the sum of all that research and my tips for designers who are doing escape rooms, how to avoid including cultural bias. So all of that information, like some of the stuff I did, like little papers and references and everything, are on bgnlab.ca. So it's the Brantford Games Network lab.ca. And there's a lot of info there too on game design and things like that. Papers, a lot of escape room papers.
Yeah, like you bring up riddles and well, you have to to solve riddles. You normally have to know lots about words, and I can definitely see that being an issue. Like I always hate when there's riddles in any escape rooms because I don't know, my brain is very like one way.
And that's exactly it. My favorite quote was from one of the people I interviewed, and who said that you don't solve riddles, you remember them. Yeah. Because if you don't already know the answer to a riddle, it is very, very hard to solve. So it takes a specific type of mindset to be able to solve a riddle. So yeah, it's when you've got players on a time limit, it's not necessarily the best route to go for a puzzle in a game.
Yeah, I know whenever I've had riddles in escape rooms, it's just I just want to throw something.
Yeah.
But that makes me remember all the other times I've been frustrated in escape rooms. I think one of the worst parts, there was this great escape room that I was in. I loved it. It's still my favorite, even though this part was really bad. But there was a dark section, and in the dark section you had to figure out you had to do something in rainbow order, which I do know. I do know rainbow, but knowing the rainbow in the dark was the worst because I wear glasses and I spend time in the dark, so it was oh, I got this right, and it didn't open, and I was just staring at it what did I do wrong, until somebody else was oh yeah, you went yellow before orange, and you should have done the other thing, and I was oh, can't tell colors
right
in the dark. Is there anything that you've discovered that things that just frustrate people?
Yeah, so when games break their own rules seems to be one of the biggest frustrations for enthusiasts, especially people who've played multiple escape rooms. So things like the game says, oh, you don't have to lift anything or damage anything. And then a part in the game requires you to break an object to get at whatever the puzzle. And it's just why would you do that? Or it's the game expects you to pry off an electrical outlet to get something inside of it. And you're just no, that's not safe. If that was a live outlet, you could be hurt doing that. So no one is necessarily going to do that of their own free will. It just kind of, it's games breaking the rules. And it's different if they tell you beforehand, okay, this game, anything goes, tear it apart. But clearly most rooms don't do that. They don't want you to break all their props.
Yeah, well, even if it's not even if a specific room doesn't tell you not to break things, I think if they they want you to break things, they should be really obvious about it.
Right.
Just because, like as you said, like escape room enthusiasts, like if you've done like a number of these, don't break things. Like
Right. Exactly.
So like if you go against any of the cultural, like is that cultural or like whatever the norms of escape?
Yeah, that's a norm. It's like the mores of escape rooms, the written rules that you're used to. Yeah.
So talking about escape rooms and like maybe the differences between escape rooms and puzzle games, like what would you say the differences are for somebody that doesn't know that much about this?
So you've got escape rooms, which are a group of people, usually in some kind of enclosed space, attempting to accomplish a goal. So sometimes that goal is to get out of the space. Sometimes that goal is to retrieve something. Sometimes the goal is to solve a mystery. It's not always escaping, but that's kind of an escape room. Escape rooms are like probably level 1 in difficulty for puzzle type games. They range, of course, in difficulty, but generally the easiest puzzles that you'll find in games will be in escape rooms because they're meant for the public, they're meant for everyone. You've got escape room tabletop games, so puzzle games that are meant for you to take home. So these are things like the exit games or the unlock games, the escape the room style games where you and your family can sit around a table and solve them all in an evening. And those, again, are maybe like a step more than escape rooms because they're all different formats. So you have to learn how you're dealing with those formats. And again, most of those are paper puzzles or very light on components, just because when you're delivering one copy to every person who wants it, it's hard to spend a lot of money on props and things. What is the escape room in a box is probably the most prop heavy tabletop escape game that I've seen. And they do a really good job integrating a lot of different items into it and real locks and things like that. And then you have like puzzle hunts, which can be in a location or can be online. Usually if they're in a specific location, they're outside and they take you through different areas. Puzzle hunts are the same type of thing. You've got teams of people or single people working together to solve the game. And so these are generally very difficult puzzles. Probably the most notable one is the MIT Mystery Hunt. And so every year they do this, and the puzzles are so hard. Oh my goodness, I'm really, really bad at them. But I enjoy watching people talk through them and trying to solve them myself. It's just really hard. And yeah, so it's teams of people solving these puzzles, and you get tons of puzzles. And generally they're kind of paper-based puzzles, but they expect you to go on the internet and maybe look into the code behind web pages or analyze background noises in a video. So some really interesting things that you can do. There's a lot of tools and apps and stuff that people who do puzzle hunts have available to them. And then a lot of times the answers for those puzzles will all go together and form a meta puzzle. And then from there you get another answer. And a lot of times puzzle hunts have multiple meta puzzles that all meta into a giant puzzle at the end. And it is crazy. So I've designed a couple puzzles for online puzzle hunts, which has been fun. It's a different level of puzzle design because usually there's 3 or more steps required to solve a puzzle in a puzzle hunt. And whereas in escape rooms, maybe there's 2 steps to solve a puzzle. So they're generally pretty straightforward in escape rooms. Puzzle hunts take that to another level.
That's a really good, like, how to tell the difference between them, like the levels that you need to go through. with that. So when you're creating these like puzzle hunts online, like what is your design process like?
So puzzle hunts are a little different. I have a slightly different way I go about it than escape rooms, but it's similar in that I usually start with the answer, especially if there is a meta puzzle involved. So if the answer to the puzzle I'm designing needs to go into another puzzle, usually that puzzle is mostly designed and they already say, okay, here's the answer that you need to make the puzzle for. From there, I decide on the theme or the narrative of the puzzle, like how does this puzzle fit into the game overall. So for example, I did a puzzle hunt style puzzle for a puzzle hunt that was in a magazine. So what it was an entire magazine, and this was the Cryptex Hunt 2019. I think that was last year's. And so what they did is they made an entire magazine, and every page of the magazine was a puzzle or more than one. And at the end of the magazine was the meta.
Everyone, for the technical difficulties, we are now back to recording. But yeah, we were talking about well, puzzle hunts, but also escape room buses and things like that. But Shannon has also been working on remote escape rooms, like escape rooms that are done via Zoom and other like, well, Google Meet, like we're doing now. Can you tell us a bit about like the differences in making a remote escape room, like the things you've learned about doing that?
Yeah, so it's very new because there weren't a lot of remote escape rooms before the pandemic, and then they just kind of exploded because escape room owners realized that they can't open their rooms when everything's on lockdown. So remote escape rooms where people can play from home. And I think the interesting thing is you see a lot of differences in how people approach it. You know, is it essentially a video game? There are some that are more like walk into a place, find energy potions, you know, smash things, like that type of escape room. Or you've got ones that are led by an avatar where it's almost a story and you're directing this character around to do what they need to do in order to solve puzzles. And then there are ones where there are literal escape rooms and it's just a game master with a GoPro who looks around the room and you tell them what to do, and it's like you're in the room solving the puzzles, but you're doing it all over camera. So, and then there's some that, you know, are more integrated where you've got paper stuff to print off to work on at home, or they divide up team members so each person has a different role. There's been some innovative stuff going on, but I still think it's a very young part of the industry, and that we're going to see a lot of growth in that if it continues on after the pandemic.
Yeah, like I mean, it makes a lot of sense, especially when you mentioned the like just one person with a GoPro like doing stuff. Like,
Yeah,
it would be so easy. Like, if all these escape rooms just exist somewhere, you just need one person and to go and
exactly.
they can host it, and they just do it repeatedly. They just do what people say. What's like one of your like favorite ways that the remote escape rooms have gone?
I like the ones that are specifically designed to be remote, where you interact with an avatar. There's some really good ones where the avatar, so the character that you're talking to and directing through the story, kind of, they have their own thoughts and opinions. And so they'll talk back at you or they'll argue with you about things and you have to convince them to do something. And, you know, and it's a lot more you're part of the story versus you're just directing someone around. I think that's really interesting, and it's something that can't really be done in a live action escape room where you're there in person. Because, you know, some escape rooms will have actors that you interact with, but the actor is just kind of another prop in the room, isn't necessarily someone that you have to convince to do things. And there are some games like that. I have played some good games with actors, but yeah, I think that's the most interesting part, is where there's a good story behind the game.
Okay. Yeah, like I haven't even like played any of these remote escape rooms, but it would be really cool just to have like that avatar, like the person to interact with. Because like I think that would make you have more of an emotional connection to it. Like
Yeah.
which is something I haven't seen in a lot of escape rooms is like the whole like making somebody actually care about things.
Yeah, that's hard. When you get more into like interactive theater and immersive theater, that's where you get more of the connection to characters. But most escape rooms stay very much puzzle oriented and don't spend as much time with characters and stories. I don't know. It's just different streams.
Mm-hmm. So when you're playtesting these things, like how is playtesting a like puzzle game or an escape room game different than playtesting like a standard board game?
Oh, it's horrible. A standard board game you can put in front of one group of people and have them play it 4 or 5 times and see how the game evolves with them, and then move to another group or play with a bunch. Puzzle games, you can't do that. People can only play a puzzle once, and then they know how to solve it. So you get one chance with every playtester. That's it for them to play your game. So you have to really consider who you're approaching and what reason you want them to play test it. So usually what I do is I start with per puzzle. So as part of like a design team, if I'm designing with a bunch of different people, we will each like design independent puzzles and then play test each other's for the first round. Just see, is this puzzle solvable? Do I know what to do with it? If I'm just designing my own game, I get my sister to do it. So I'm like, here's a puzzle. Tell me what you think about it. What do you think you should do? And she hates puzzles, so it's really good. It's a good play test because if she can figure out what to do, it probably makes sense. And then from there, as you start iterating, you want to look outside. And the goal is to get all the puzzles integrated fast enough so that the puzzles work and they're integrated, and then put sections of the game down in front of different groups and see if they can solve it. Because a puzzle on its own may be easy, but when you integrate that puzzle into an entire game and someone has all these different props and papers and things in front of them, and they're in a setting that is all decorated and everything, how do they know that that's a puzzle? How does that fit into the world, and how do they know how to solve it, and what's important to that puzzle to solve? So it's a lot of steps, and you have to, I usually, when I start putting the game together, the full game, I'll give it to some very experienced puzzle solvers, people who can say, yeah, this puzzle doesn't make sense, and this puzzle doesn't work, and I have no idea where you're going with this, and this one's actually really good, but I don't know that it works at this part of the game. You know, that's the feedback you want. And then from there, as it starts to get more and more solid, you can take it to play testers who maybe don't do a lot of puzzle games. And it also depends on who your audience is. You know, I make a lot of games for the general public, in which case puzzles have to be very easy and very obvious and make sense. So that's usually when I go to the public, is towards the end, and like, okay, play this. Does it work? Does it make sense? Can you tell what the story is? Do you know what to do at every step?
It sounds like kind of a hassle because like you have like so many play testers.
Yeah.
But I really like how you talk about like first the puzzle and then like a set of puzzles and then finally like the end of it, where like for like a regular board game, like I rarely test out like not the whole way through.
Right. Yeah. Unless you have a really, really complex Euro game or something, there's no need to really just test the core mechanic too much. It's more, how does that integrate with the rest of the game? So you need most of the game. But yeah, puzzles are different because each puzzle on its own is like a mini game. Puzzles are basically games with a winnable state. So puzzles, you can always win, and you want your players to win the puzzle every single time, but then can they win 20 puzzles in a row when they get all the stuff in front of them at once? That's a different story.
Yes. Do you have any tips or like for puzzle game specific playtesting tips?
So I have a bunch on my Twitter. There's actually a pinned post that were like my tips for tabletop escape games. So my Twitter is Shannon Creates. So you can check that out there. I'd say my biggest tip for playtesting is playtest with as many different groups of people as you can. Like, and by different, I mean diverse. So my one escape game, I had a 5-year-old play it, and I had an 80-year-old play it. I had people who hadn't graduated high school yet, and I had people who'd like had graduate degrees, and I had people who played 100 or more escape rooms and people who had played 0. So just diversity. And then people from different countries and people with different cultural backgrounds than you. Get as many people as possible to play it. If you can, get someone who's colorblind to play it. Get someone, you know, if it's an escape room and you have sound or smell puzzles, get people who are hard of hearing to play it. You know, just, is your game appropriate for all these people? And if it's not, you know, you can either change that or you put a warning on the game. That I have warnings on some of my games that say there is one puzzle in here that is not appropriate if you're colorblind, because color is a significant part of the puzzle. So make sure, because there was at the Escape Room World Championship one year, we had a team where 3 of the 4 players were colorblind, and there was a puzzle where teams were separated and expected to distinguish colors. That clearly did not work for that team. So yeah, it's something, you know, to be aware of.
Yeah, I mean that is very important. I always try to make games like colorblind friendly, but like sometimes you just can't in like making it known. I do wish there was like something on board game boxes, like just an icon that would be like, oh yeah, this isn't colorblind friendly. But I don't think we've gotten there yet. Well, I mean, if people knew that their game wasn't colorblind friendly, they should probably just fix it.
Yeah, and you know, with colors, you can pair, in escape rooms, you can pair a color with a symbol or a color with a sound, and that can help. But some puzzles, that would just give it away completely. So it's interesting. I think you can definitely do puzzles without color. But, you know, I did an escape room game that was based on a art school, and it's very hard to not have a puzzle that involves color when you're talking about paints and crayons and art projects.
Can you tell us about some of the like actual puzzle games that you've designed?
Okay, so I have 3 escape room, like tabletop escape room games that I've designed that are just a deck of cards, solve puzzles with the cards. I was part of the design team for the World Championship, the Red Bull Escape Room World Championship, and that was a full build out escape room, 2 escape rooms really, in basically a warehouse in London, England, that ended up getting built, and you know, coming up with puzzles and changing them right up to the week before the competition was going to go on. So that was interesting. I've designed puzzles for puzzle hunts, but those are generally individual puzzles, not necessarily an entire game. And as working at Laurier University, I assisted student teams. So we'd have organizations, so companies or museums or schools, hire a team of students in the game design program to design escape rooms for their business. And so usually these are educational escape rooms. Students did one at a museum in Zurich, Switzerland. They did a dinosaur themed one at a paleontology museum in Alberta. They've done a few different escape rooms, educational escape rooms. And so I'll help the student teams with designing their puzzles and brainstorming and that kind of thing. So yeah, so that's the gist of it. As far as like, and honestly, if you're talking board games, every co-op game is a puzzle that players are trying to solve.
So, like, going on that, like, do you think that you're really good at designing co-op games because of your background in puzzle games?
I generally lean towards designing co-ops, which is funny because I don't necessarily like playing them. I'm an alpha player. I want to just play the whole game myself and tell people what to do, which means I know better than to play co-ops with people because it makes it not a fun experience for other people. Solo is better. But yeah, designing them, because it's creating a puzzle that players then need to solve. It's also why I like the types of games where every player has their own player board and it's just who solves the puzzle best. So you see that a lot in roll and writes. So like Cartographers and Welcome to, everyone has their own board and it's just who solves the puzzle the best is the one who wins. Oh, for goodness sakes. Sorry about the cat.
Yeah, it happens. It's also very vocal. But I really like the point you made about roll and writes, where I never thought about it, but like I really like escape room games and escape rooms and puzzles in general, but and also roll and writes. So
yeah,
like I mean, it makes sense that I'm just like solving my own puzzle, so therefore I like roll and writes. Have you designed some roll and writes?
not of that style, but yes. I have one that I'm making, and actually, it's funny because you mentioned this earlier, where I tweeted that, oh, the co-op game I thought I was designing turned out to be a competitive game, and that one is actually kind of a roll and write, where it's a heist-themed game where you're a bunch of children in a house trying to sneak down to the kitchen and steal as many cookies as you can before you get caught by the parents. And so originally it was more, roll the dice and draft an action and everyone goes and does the things and has to do the heist. And then I realized the balance for me, especially for like asymmetric co-ops, is that you have to make each person's game interesting enough that they're engaged to play their own game. And there just wasn't enough game there to make it a co-op. Whereas competitive, instead of sharing your resources and everyone taking one aspect, now everyone's responsible for all the resources for their own game. And it made it just more fun, and there was more you could do, and there was more flexibility in what people could go after and what their goals were. So I was like, darn it. I was just sitting there going, man, this game, I can't figure out how to get this mechanic to work, but it would just work so much better if this game was competitive. And I stopped and I was like, oh, wait, this should just be a competitive game. And that was that. And now I'm designing it as a competitive game.
Like, I really like that story of like, it would be so much easier if, but like you realize that, but didn't like, well, you had to hear that to know like, oh yeah, it should just be competitive. Has that ever happened to you where you're like designing a co-op and it just, this is actually competitive, I just didn't know it?
Oh, definitely. And it's happened the other way around too, where I've started designing a game and going, oh, this is a competitive game. And then I go, oh, actually, no, I really should make this co-op because there's way too much going on. And especially because I tend to design more family-oriented games, that, you know, parents and children can play together. But I'm like, oh, if there's too much going on, then make it a co-op, because that way you split the work among multiple people. But that also depends on, you know, what's the story of the game? Does it make sense for it to be a co-op game? Does it make sense for it to be competitive? Yeah.
So when you're doing that, like, have you ever gone like where there's like so much in there, so you're like, oh, okay, so it should be a co-op, like, but like the story doesn't matter. Like, would you then like just change the story up and use the same mechanics, or would you like go in a different direction and make it like less?
I'm trying to think of an example where I did that. I'm not sure that any of the games that I did that have actually survived to be like a pitchable product. Just because if a game's not working, I just set it aside. So I have too many games to work on to worry about one that's like not as good. So yeah, like I have changed the theme of games and what the story is before, but not specifically. I had one that I thought was a co-op game that ended up becoming a solo game. Because again, it was the same type of thing, is there just wasn't enough going on to make it worthwhile to be a co-op. But yeah, I can't think of example the other way around.
So for that game, like, instead you made it solo. Why did you choose that versus making it competitive?
Because, so in this case, it was a very low component game. I think my goal with it was just, it was a 54 card deck. So yeah, it was low components, and they're just, it was a puzzle. It was a puzzle game, but where if it was competitive, all the players would be working on the same board, and there's limited number of resources. So it just didn't work. Also, there was a timer in the game that the player controlled. So if it was a competitive game, players would be resetting the timer all the time, and that just didn't work when everyone was trying to play the game, because then everyone would have to start over if one player decides to screw up the whole thing. Yeah, there was a lot of reasons why it wouldn't work in that, but mostly because it was a puzzle. It should have been either a co-op or a solo, because as competitive working on it, there wouldn't have been, it would have been a lot of people playing their own game and just incidentally screwing over other people, which didn't work for what the theme was. And
Yeah, like that makes a lot of sense about like making it solo versus competitive, because yeah, if I was like doing a puzzle game and somebody was like, oh yeah, you have to reset what you're doing, like I feel like that would make a lot of frustration, and like not a good kind of frustration either.
Yeah, and especially in this case, because of the specific timer mechanism that I use, every interaction would be revealed at a certain time, and like when time reset, you could go back, but only at those times. And I'm going, oh, that would just suck if everyone had different interactions at different times, and trying to keep track of that would have just been terrible. So I guess it was more me saying, I don't want to do the work to now make this a competitive game, so let's just make it solo.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, especially if you have a lot of games that you could work on.
Yeah, exactly.
So, when you're designing all these, like either escape room games or puzzle board games, how do you try to determine what the difficulty level of the puzzle is, and also where you want it to be?
So my general tip for anyone designing puzzles is make it super easy. Make it very easy. You think that's too easy? No, make it easier, because you will always, always make the puzzle too hard for what you're designing. Probably the only exception to that rule is puzzle hunts, where puzzles are expected to be insanely hard. But you still want a player to look back on those puzzles and say, oh yeah, I should have gotten that. Like, that's such an obvious answer. If a player can't look back on your puzzle and say, oh, why didn't I get that? It was super obvious, then you've done something wrong. Yeah, you have to figure out, like, because I go easy, I just go the most easy puzzles I can think of. And even then, and I include hints and signposting and as much environmental storytelling as I can in puzzles. And sometimes it still doesn't matter and the puzzle's too hard for the game I'm trying to fit it in. When I was making my third escape room card game, that one was meant to be the most difficult one. And I was also designing puzzle hunt puzzles at the same time as I was designing this one. So a little too much puzzle hunt snuck into that game, and it was not appropriate for the general public. I felt really badly. I had, it was Mandy and Jordan Goddard were the first people who tested that game as a whole. And I felt terrible for them because all the puzzles were way beyond what should be in an escape room game. And they were just so hard. And I told them, okay, don't worry, all those are being scrapped because they played some of my other games and they're big escape room people. And they were like, these are hard. And I'm like, yeah, sorry. And yeah, I had to really scale back my puzzles because they were much too difficult for something that, you know, could go out to the general public.
So, did you really figure that out just by watching playtesters?
Yes. Yeah. I'm a lot better now that I've made so many puzzles that I know to start simple, and it's easier to make puzzles more difficult, I think, because you just remove information. If you want to make puzzles easier, you add more information in there so that players have more to start with. And ideally if you want an easy escape room game, you go with the puzzle that has every single piece of information already there except one. And then players just have to discover that one piece, fit it in the right spot, and they have the answer. If you want to make it harder, you don't provide them any information. So think about a Sudoku puzzle. So the more numbers are in the Sudoku, the easier it is to solve, right? But if you get a Sudoku that has like 2 numbers and that's it in the grid, that's really tough to start with. So, and it's the same kind of thing when you scale with puzzles, is removing and adding information.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Well, especially when you put it in the whole Sudoku.
Yeah.
Like when there's like 8 numbers in the Sudoku like square already, you just have to find that one. But if there's like 1, then you have to do it.
Yeah, or none. There's actually a Sudoku out there that has 0 numbers to start. And it's funny. There's a guy on YouTube, I forget his name, and he basically like solved Sudoku puzzles and different paper puzzles, and it's fascinating. And some of these puzzles, I'm going, I do not understand how you just solved that, but it was very clever.
Yes, indeed. Like, I don't know. I like initially I was like, oh, a Sudoku with no numbers, that should be really easy. But then like, it wouldn't be.
And a lot of puzzles like that, a lot of times have different rules too. Like these particular numbers can't be in a diagonal with another of the same number, and you know, things like that. And you can't have numbers within a knight's chess move of the same number. And I'm going, who remembers all of these things?
Somebody loves puzzles.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing, is I find puzzles take so much longer to make than people take to solve them, especially complicated ones. It's very difficult, the things you have to look at.
About how much time longer? Would you say it's like a 10x amount of time, like to make the puzzle versus solving, or like even more than that?
depends on the difficulty you're looking at, right? Some easy puzzles, if you're just doing a straight like alphanumeric code, that's pretty easy because you just decide what your answer is and you write out the numbers that correspond to the letters and boom, you've got a puzzle. But I had one puzzle that it's actually one of my favorites that I've designed, and it used a code, but you wouldn't recognize it as a code first off. So I developed the code, and then I developed basically it was essentially a crossword puzzle that it wasn't, but it worked the same way. So I used a type of paper puzzle that people already knew. So people understand how crossword puzzles work, right? So you got no clues for it. But as people filled out the things in the crossword, they're getting clues as to how to fill out more, and then they can fill out more. And by the time they're done, they have the answer to the code. They know all the letters that are the code and can fill that out and answer it. And it's actually it's a very nuanced puzzle because there's literally one answer for the crossword, essentially, that you can get right off the bat, because it is the only possible thing that can go in that box based on the theme. And then from there, you can get the second word answer. And then from there, you can get the third and fourth. And then from there, the rest of it is obvious. But there was a lot of details that went into that to make it so easy and step by step. And once you get that first step, you're probably good to solve the puzzle. But that's really complicated to do. That puzzle was relatively quick. I think I might have worked on that one for like a week to get it. And it got changed twice. I changed two things about it to make it just slightly more smooth of an experience. But other than that, it worked pretty well. But I had one puzzle that I changed like 5 times, and I worked on it on and off for probably a month in order to get it to work, because I was taking letters and trying to make other words out of these letters. And so I had to keep changing the letters that I was initially starting with so that I could try and make words that made sense to make it a puzzle. And it was so hard. And that one took a long time of me just staring at letters at midnight going, am I tired enough to make these make sense yet? And I'll be like, no, I guess I have to do it tomorrow. So that one was definitely, I think that was the last puzzle for that game that I ended up finishing because it was just so complex and convoluted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does sound really interesting though, and I'll have to like follow up with you after to try to find out more about it. I want to solve it now. So if anyone wants to learn more about puzzle games and stuff and how to create puzzles, do you have any like recommended books or other resources you would recommend?
Yeah, so one of the classics is Puzzlecraft, which is a book by Mike Selinker and Thomas Snyder, I want to say. Anyway, the Puzzlecraft books are mostly on creating paper puzzles, so like crosswords and cryptograms and those style of puzzles. But it's also got a lot of really good theory on puzzle creation. So those are pretty good. There's also, if you're looking more at escape room style puzzles, the Room Escape Divas podcast is great if you are starting to like create your own escape room games, because they are divas and they will tell you about it, and they do a lot of complaining about things that they hate in escape rooms and things that they would like to see in escape rooms, and commenting on good puzzles. And they interview a lot of industry professionals too, so it's a really fun podcasts to listen to, and they have some specifically good ones about like narrative and how to integrate characters and story into your escape rooms and stuff like that. Also, the roomescapeartist.com, their blog has a lot of good resources for it's a review blog mostly for puzzle games, but they also go into articles about different aspects of puzzle games and things you should look at and good puzzle design and stuff like that. They also do a yearly state of the industry for escape rooms, which is very interesting. And they also ran Recon this year, Reality Escape Convention, which is a escape room industry convention that was run through Discord this year. So
okay, well that is definitely it sounds like some really good resources that will
I have so many puzzle resources. That's been my life for the last 2 years. So
well, it's really exciting. So where can people find you after this?
So Twitter is your best bet. So I'm Shannon Creates on Twitter, and also my papers and some of my videos will eventually be posted on the bgnlab.ca page. So all my work on cultural bias in escape rooms and that kind of stuff will all be posted there.
That's great. Do you have any last thoughts to share? That like anything we didn't go over, or any like summary?
Oh my goodness. Make puzzles. More people need to be designing escape rooms and making puzzles. I'm always looking for puzzles to solve. That's I also just literally this week started a Patreon where I'm going to be posting I have a huge backlog of puzzles that have never made it into any of my actual games. So I'll be posting them all on my Patreon for access there. So if you'd like to support me in making more puzzles, I'm Shannon Creates on Patreon as well.
Oh, awesome. That sounds so cool. Like the value for a Patreon like that is really good.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get them up. I have some really good ones that I was so excited to make, and then the game never came together. So now I have all these individual puzzles that I'd like to share with people.
Yeah, and we're all like, well, we at least have some free time because we're not traveling.
Yeah.
Just to solve puzzles. Well, thank you so much for being here, and thank you everyone for watching. If you want to participate between every live show, we have a Discord at weirddraftgames.com/Discord. So come talk about games all the time. I hope everyone has a great weekend.